Phoenix is coming to Marvel Rivals next season, and she is absolutely the most powerful hero to be added to the game so far, at least as far as the lore goes anyway. In fact, the story behind Phoenix and the scale of just how powerful she can be is really quite interesting. As you'll later learn in this video, she can even become more powerful than Galactus or Thanos with all of the Infinity Stones in his grasp, and well, she's really quite impressive. So what is the lore behind her and Jean Grey? How do the Phoenix powers in Marvel Rivals relate to her lore? And what part does Phoenix play in the Marvel Rivals lore specifically? Well, let's first start with Phoenix's origin story, which will help us to understand just how powerful she can be. It all started in Uncanny X-Men issue 101. The X-Men were returning from space and had to travel through a solar flare with dangerous levels of radiation. Jean Grey used her abilities to shield the X-Men from the radiation, but as a result, the ship crash lands into Jamaica Bay, and Jean Grey is nowhere to be seen. Whilst the other X-Men surface from the water, no one can see Jean Grey, until suddenly she ends up rising from the water with a new costume, suddenly calling herself Phoenix before falling unconscious. Whilst the X-Men weren't aware at the time, the real Jean Grey was actually laying under the water in a cocoon, and the Jean Grey that left the water was a Phoenix Force duplicate of her. It gets kind of complicated. Anyway, the Phoenix Force in Marvel is the embodiment of all psionic energy of the past, present, and future in all realities of the multiverse. The Phoenix Force can delete, fix, or rework any part of the universe and is basically one of the most powerful beings to ever exist. It's Marvel, so actually not the most powerful being to exist, but one of the most. The Phoenix Force will often attach itself to a host because without a host, it's basically an entity without a physical body. And for some reason, it's pretty much always interested in Jean Grey. Maybe it's to do with her immense telepathic powers, but in most of Marvel lore, the Phoenix always attaches itself to Jean Grey, although there are some instances of that not being the case. However, this seems to be why the version of Phoenix in Marvel Rivals has very little telekinesis powers, even though Jean Grey herself does have such abilities, because the powers of Phoenix, the Phoenix Force, it's just so much more interesting, and also you got a lot more freedom of control when it comes to development. And whilst throughout Marvel history, Jean Grey and Phoenix are usually separate beings, they are almost always tied together, and Jean Grey is probably one of the few heroes to die in the comics over and over again, and it's almost always through the Phoenix Force that she comes back to life. So yeah, it's likely why the Marvel Rivals team leaned more into the Phoenix side of Jean Grey's abilities. It's basically a free ticket to make any abilities you could ever want for a character. Jean Grey's powers when bonding with the Phoenix Force become basically everything you could ever try to think of, including energy manipulation, matter manipulation, resurrection, and then yeah, Jean Grey's typical telepathy and telekinesis stuff. Now what gets really interesting and a good opportunity for some amazing costumes is that there are actually multiple versions of the Phoenix Force, all of which could use Jean Grey as their host. The normal Phoenix, or Green Phoenix, is basically just the version most often seen in Marvel Comics when using Jean Grey as its host. Like, basically the standard vanilla Phoenix Force. Then there's the Dark Phoenix, which appears when the Phoenix's host becomes corrupted by lust, greed, and desire. This first showed itself in the Uncanny X-Men comics starting around issue 129. In this series, Mastermind sees Jean Grey, who's actually just Phoenix, by the way, and not the real Jean Grey, remember? Anyway, as a potential target to take advantage of in an attempt to join the Hellfire Club. Mastermind seduces Jean, and then uses a mind tap device made by Emma Frost to project illusions straight into Jean Grey's mind. Phoenix is basically tricked into thinking she's another person, and through that is fooled into her exploring the most selfish and extreme human emotions, something that normally Jean Grey is able to block to keep herself safe, because without that sort of mental barrier, then who knows what the Phoenix Force could end up evolving into. Well, we will know, because it happened in this Uncanny X-Men series. She's basically tricked into becoming the Black Queen for the Hellfire Club, and whilst it saw the comic go down a bit of a weird romance story between Phoenix and Mastermind, it also showed what could end up being a really cool costume concept for Phoenix in Marvel Rivals. And anyway, this leads to her becoming power-hungry and transforms her into the Dark Phoenix, a cosmic entity that uses its powers fueled by its emotions. And it's really hungry for power. With this newfound lust for power, Dark Phoenix first uses a telepathic illusion to make Mastermind go insane. Dark Phoenix then leaves Earth and travels out on an intergalactic journey, but her traveling leaves her weak. So to gain more energy, she just completely drains an entire sun in a distant galaxy. Yeah, she's pretty powerful. And this unfortunately causes a supernova and kills millions of people living on a nearby orbiting planet. So yeah, she's responsible for a lot of suffering. I do think that Dark Phoenix could be a really awesome opportunity for some cool costumes, though. And the craziest part is that there is an even more powerful variant of the Phoenix Force, and that is the White Phoenix of the Crown. And I'll explain that now, and then later, once we get to the Marvel Rivals lore part of this video, there's maybe an even more powerful version that the Marvel Rivals devs are working on. But first, let's focus on the White Phoenix of the Crown. This is a state of the Phoenix Force where it's basically merged and become one with Jean Grey. This version is not just two separate entities anymore. So it's not the Phoenix Force using Jean Grey as a host, but they instead become one, a single entity. And at this point, on top of all of the other powers Phoenix holds, including the ability to devour stars, Phoenix, as the White Phoenix of the Crown, can now manipulate space and time, rewrite timelines, and even reach out and make an impact across multiple different multiverses. She basically has complete control over every atom of space and time across every second of the past, present, and future all at once. She's basically one of the most powerful beings in the entirety of Marvel, more powerful than Galactus by many times over, and more powerful than Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet. There's of course more powerful beings like the One Above All or Beyonder, but this form of Phoenix is easily more powerful than any other hero currently in Marvel Rivals. In fact, probably more powerful than all of them put together. So now we know the origin of Phoenix's story. I wanted to take a little bit of a dive into Phoenix's story in Marvel Rivals itself, because we get a better kind of look at the Marvel Rivals devs' sort of reimagination of who this character is. So time for a bit of story time. I'm going to read it out to you because you can't read it yourselves in game. So the main bio page says, an Omega level telepath and telekinetic, Jean Grey was already one of the most powerful mutants on Earth. Her bond with the Phoenix Force, a cosmic entity embodying creation itself, made her one of the most powerful beings in the universe. So Jean and the Phoenix left Krakoa before the time stream entanglement struck. Their journey took them across the galaxy, saving countless civilizations. Yeah, luckily it didn't mention the part where they literally destroyed a civilization from existence, but, you know, I guess doing bad once doesn't matter if you've done good a billion times over. Anyway, sensing an unusual disturbance in time and space, Jean and the Phoenix decided to travel to Clintar to eliminate the darkness at its source, Null, the King in Black. So, as her being Phoenix, she can pretty much know what's going on at all times across all multiverses. So she's able to then travel to Clintar to try and get involved in the whole story of Season 3. Now, if we look at our further bio page, we can learn even more. The Phoenix gently soared across the empty void of space on wings born of cosmic flame. But as the primal force of creation journeyed valiantly through uncharted regions of the cosmos, the mind of its mortal host, the Omega-level telepath called Jean Grey, was adrift amid thoughts of her home planet, Earth. It had been years since Jean had left her fellow mutants behind on Krakoa, traveling to the far reaches of the galaxy to share the Phoenix's spark of creation with worlds in need. But even though it had only been a relatively short time, especially when compared to the Phoenix epic lifespan, it still felt like an eternity since Jean had last seen her old friends. At first, she had maintained her telepathic rapport with her paramour, Scott Summers, as a way to retain a bit of her own humanity. But that bond was suddenly severed when a temporal storm ripped across reality. After that unfortunate event, try as she might, Jean could no longer contact any of her allies on the living island she had once called home. It was as if they had simply vanished into the time stream, and not even the all-powerful Phoenix could find any traces of them. That seems somewhat a little bit unlikely considering Phoenix's powers, so if that actually happened, then something very strange is happening. Despite all evidence suggesting that the X-Men were lost and gone forever, Jean never gave up faith that her mutant brethren would one day return. And finally, years later, that spark of hope within her had ignited into a flame as bright as the Phoenix Force itself. Just days ago, in the silence of deep space, Jean was shocked to hear a familiar voice echo in her mind. There was no mistaking that it belonged to Magneto, and it uttered a phrase she had longed to hear for ages. "To me, my X-Men." Spending so many years bonded to a force of nature as old as the universe itself, Jean had learned firsthand that time worked in the most mysterious of ways. So it didn't really surprise Jean that the source of that voice was coming from 70 light years further than the distance between her and Earth. Had Magneto and Krakoa been teleported to the far reaches of the universe, or had they somehow jumped forward decades into the future? Jean didn't know, but she knew she had to find the answer. Reaching out across time and space with her mental powers, Jean was soon able to confirm her suspicions. Somewhere in the future, Krakoa had finally returned, and along with it, many of her dearest friends, Aurora, Eric, Ileana, Emma, and Logan. But where was Scott? Jean vowed to find out and wasn't willing to waste another second. She spread the Phoenix's flaming wings and changed her trajectory, heading straight toward the planet of her birth. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Before she could make any progress toward Earth, the Phoenix alerted Jean of an impending crisis on the other side of the galaxy. A massive star was dying, and it was up to the Phoenix to revive it before it was fully extinguished. Billions of lives on the surrounding planets hung in the balance, so a proper welcome home for her mutant brothers and sisters would have to wait just a little longer. As soon as the Phoenix reached the fading sun, both she and Jean felt an icy chill run through them. They could immediately tell that this star wasn't dying due to natural causes. Its brilliance was being snuffed out by an external force, almost as if a dark, unseen hand was trying to crush the star's light within its grip. Jean had never felt like it before, but the Phoenix had aeons ago. There was a dark god, born at the dawn of existence, who had sought to extinguish every flame in the cosmos. From the stars to the Phoenix herself, he called himself the King in Black, but others knew him as Null. As the Phoenix spoke Null's name, Jean could feel her partner shudder, and that made Jean shudder as well, since she had never felt anything akin to fear in the Phoenix Force before. But she knew that they couldn't let fear stop them from their current mission. There were innocent lives on the line. Without hesitation, Jean dove into the very heart of the sun, calling upon the full fury of the Phoenix to reignite its plasma. In the process, the dark tendrils that had ensnared the star were incinerated. In a split second, Jean had saved dozens of inhabited worlds, just as she and the Phoenix had done together on so many occasions over the years. But there was no time to celebrate. If Null had indeed returned, the Phoenix warned, then a single star system meant next to nothing compared to the death and destruction he could cause. If Null had his way, every species in this reality would soon be on the brink of extinction. Jean Grey wasn't about to let some self-proclaimed king unleash his reign of terror on the universe. The Phoenix agreed, telling Jean about Null's last known whereabouts, the world known as Clintar. What was once Null's greatest creation had ironically become his eternal prison when his own symbiotic offspring trapped in within the planet's core. Since the universe had already been completely shrouded in its darkness, it was likely that Null was still there, subtly spreading his influence as he worked on a way to finally escape. Clintar was light years away, but fortunately, the Phoenix knew a shortcut. The defined space was a plane of reality that only those with vast cosmic power could access and traverse. The Phoenix entered this ethereal realm with ease, but soon realized that she and her host were not alone. There, within the sacred plane, was a gathering of godlike beings, each of them bearing the stench of Null's oblivion. Somehow he had corrupted these majestic beings, and they had taken refuge in the divine space. But had they gone there to escape Null's influence, or to plan their next attack in the Dark Lord's name? The Phoenix soon had her answer. "You burn with the fury of a million suns," growled Bast, the Wakandan panther goddess. "You do not belong in our master's glorious oblivion. Your flames must be smothered." "I'd like to see you try," Jean Grey said with a smile. As the Phoenix let out a cry that echoed through the divine space, Bast lunged at the firebird with her claws bared and her jaws open wide. "You will be extinguished," Bast roared, her claws slashing through the Phoenix's fiery wings. "I am fire and life incarnate," the Phoenix responded, her voice echoing from her host while her wings instantly reformed, as if Bast had never touched her at all. "Today only the darkness shall be burnt away." Summoning every ounce of her strength, the Phoenix released a burst of cleansing cosmic flame that washed over Bast and the other dark deities, instantly purging the corruption from them. Bast licked her wounds, but then joined the grateful gods as they bowed in reverence to the Phoenix. Reborn anew, they departed the divine space to return to their home pantheons. Jean Grey and the Phoenix were now alone and exhausted. Either of their recent acts of heroism would have been more than enough to diminish their power significantly, but performing both of these epic feats back-to-back had reduced the Phoenix's dazzling flames to a mere flicker. If they hoped to reach Clintar with enough might to take on Null, Jean knew that they needed to rest and recover. Luckily, the divine space was more than just a cosmic shortcut. This realm was also teeming with primordial forces that would help restore the Phoenix to her full glory in nearly no time at all. As she floated in this peaceful plane, Jean closed her eyes and let her mind drift once more. But this time, she wasn't sensing her friends back on Earth. Instead, thanks to the strange energies flowing through the divine space, she found herself catching brief glimpses of the past, the present, and the future. A strange image formed in her mind, as real as anything she had ever experienced before. She was enveloped in a flood of scarlet energy, a raw, chaotic power that seemed to somehow simultaneously oppose and complement the Phoenix Force. She could feel the Phoenix fighting against it at first, but eventually embracing it. The two forces reached a perfect balance, condensing into a burning scarlet crown that perched on Jean's head. Jean's eyes shot open and she reached up, but even though she could still feel the weight of the scarlet crown, it was gone. Even so, Jean knew that this had been more than just a dream. It was a vision of what was to come, and though she didn't know exactly what it meant, she had a feeling she would soon find out enough. Jean didn't know how long she had been lost in this dream state. It could have been mere moments or countless days, but in that time, the Phoenix Force had thankfully been restored to full power. Without a word shared between them, they exited the divine space together, leaving a glowing trail of celestial fire in their wake. They would have to reach Clintar soon if they wished to stop Null, and they would have to hope that no one with motives less noble than theirs reached that world before they did. So if we take a look at this skin here, Chaos Phoenix, it seems to be that the lore is actually suggesting that Jean Grey ends up becoming an even more powerful version of Phoenix in the Marvel Rivals lore. So we don't know if this is going to be even more powerful than the white crown of the Phoenix, but in this version, somehow Jean Grey and the Phoenix will bond with chaos magic, and out of that will become Chaos Phoenix, which will essentially be an even more powerful version of Phoenix that can use the Phoenix Force and chaos magic together, and Jean Grey's abilities. Like, I don't know how powerful that can even be considered on a chart, if you can even put it on a chart. But yeah, there's a new Phoenix in town, and it is Chaos Phoenix. So that's a look at the lore of Phoenix and her lore in Marvel Rivals as well. We've never heard of Chaos Phoenix before. This seems to be something new that the Marvel Rivals devs are going towards, which is pretty awesome. What are your thoughts about Phoenix in Marvel Rivals? Are you excited? Is she too overpowered? Let me know, and I'll see you in the comments.